heavy rain in places. It'll feel disappointing for mid-May, with temperatures staying in single figures for some. Northern Ireland, though, will be seeing skies begin to brighten up. However, some further showers will be quickly moving up from the south. Temperatures there more like 15 or 16 Celsius. And the rest of the afternoon will see the brighter skies continue to move northwards, but still with some rain around. And that's how the weather is shaping up for you this Monday morning.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
To you, it's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now this morning, are we headed for a trade war with Europe? Could we all soon be paying for road use rather than fuel duty? And as some Labour MPs are already positioning themselves to stand for the party's leadership, should Sir Keir Starmer be brought down over Beergate? All that after your morning news.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, Boris Johnson is heading to Belfast to hold emergency talks with Northern Ireland's leaders today in a bid to try to break the Stormont deadlock. The Prime Minister's threatened to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol through new legislation in Westminster. He wants to do that despite warnings from the EU that it would breach international law. Well, the Assembly there has been plunged into crisis in the wake of the local elections, with the DUP refusing to join a devolved government. The Home Office Minister, Rachel Maclean, told GB News it was clear the protocol isn't working.
Well, clearly the situation is urgent. That's why the Prime Minister is going to Belfast, to get round the table with all the parties involved. We are seeing an impact now on Northern Ireland. All parties, I think, are agreed that the protocol in its current format doesn't work. And that's why we need to continue these dialogues and find the way through this.
Sweden will send diplomats to Turkey today in an attempt to overcome objections to the country joining NATO. Well, the Scandinavian nation is expected to make a formal application to join the military alliance today, bringing to an end 73 years of opposition to the move. Finland confirmed yesterday it would also be applying for membership. The Home Secretary has permanently lifted restrictions on the stop and search powers used by the police. It's part of the government's strategy to tackle violent crime. Priti Patel has now given officers the right to search people without reasonable grounds in an area where they expect serious violence. A statue of Baroness Margaret Thatcher's been egged less than 2 hours after being erected in her hometown in Lincolnshire. A protester was seen throwing eggs at the memorial shortly after it was lowered into place in Grantham yesterday. No arrests have been made. The Queen received a standing ovation on the last day of the Royal Windsor Horse Show. Her Majesty smiled as she arrived to an arena to audience cheers in the grounds of Windsor Castle. Earlier last week, she arrived at the show, having previously missed the state opening of Parliament because of mobility issues. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now let's head to Tom for this morning's briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:33 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, the Prime Minister is set to go ahead with controversial legislation on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss prepared a bill last week that could see some parts of the Brexit deal scrapped and could have the potential to start a trade war. That's according to some analysts. Now, Boris Johnson is in Belfast today to restart those stalled talks with the European Union over the issue. He said it was designed before a global pandemic and a European war, which has created a cost of living crisis on a scale not seen for half a century. But would scrapping the protocol entirely have those consequences? Would it spark a trade law, or should we continue to follow legislation set out in those negotiations? Well, let's head over to Belfast. Our Northern Ireland correspondent, Doogie Beattie, is live from Stormont. Welcome to the programme, Doogie. Boris Johnson travelling to Belfast today to try and sort of foster a greater sense of understanding, perhaps. Will he have any luck?
No. The short answer to that is definitely not. It is all down to optics and credibility is the biggest thing here. Boris Johnson has been seen as he has took the DUP on a journey, promised all and delivered nothing. And for that, he is now paying the price. And the people of Northern Ireland are paying the price. The problem is that we had an election here just a couple of weeks ago. The DUP, it was thought that their vote was going to collapse. It didn't. They lost 3 seats. Sinn Féin returned with 27 seats, of exactly what it left with, it returned with. The problem here that Boris has is he's got to convince the DUP that he is going to fix the protocol. The problem is it's been promised far, far too many times, and the DUP are not going to move. Even legislation being prepared, I don't believe will be enough, from what I'm hearing from DUP sources, to put them back into government. I think anything less than Article 16 being triggered, that will probably give them the room then to go into government and negotiations to begin from the very start. But over the weekend, the pressure has really been coming. I reported on Friday that the pressure was now going to be on Dublin. And Simon Coveney definitely over the weekend has appeared on many news outlets here, and he seems to be under pressure. He's saying that it's going to destroy the Good Friday Agreement, etc. But on the other side of that, we have newspapers in Northern Ireland with front page headlines with pictures of loyalist gunmen and mentioning things like legitimate targets. This is spiralling out of control very, very quickly. And unless we get a lid on this and some sort of stability back into Northern Ireland, it could go very wrong in the next few weeks.
It's interesting you mentioned there that the changes proposed might not be enough for the DUP. We might enter a circumstance where the government ends up annoying the EU side of this, and indeed the nationalist community, by changing things, but not changing them enough to placate the unionist side of politics, for whom the protocol simply is not working at all. The consent for the protocol has been dropped in its entirety. That's a fascinating distinction there. I wonder, though, is there a distinction between what Stormont thinks and what the people of Northern Ireland think? Because a number of commentators have said since those elections that, yes, the unionist vote was absolutely implacably opposed to the protocol, but actually the Alliance Party, the non-aligned sort of centrist party, did very well, and adding up, as we sometimes do after elections, various votes, it does look like a majority of votes may have gone to parties at least ambivalent in this situation.
The Alliance Party, there's no doubt about it, they did extremely well, but because we operate a PR system here and a transferable vote, a lot of this is to blame on the DUP's own management of the vote and the fact that the TUV, the True Unionist Voice, came out and they were so anti-protocol far to the right on this, they took 66,000 votes out of the DUP. Now, it wasn't as if they came from another area, they came straight out of the DUP, which is even more worrying because that means that they had the seats that would have brought them back as the majority, and we can only take from that those transfers there wouldn't have came across. Also, the DUP didn't run enough candidates, I don't believe. They ran 30, Sinn Féin ran 34, and Sinn Féin's vote management is amazing. It really is. I mean, they have them 1, 2, 3. I spoke about this before, and their percentage of votes are within 1 percentage point of each candidate. So it is very tricky to really gauge that, because when you look at the seats that the Alliance have picked up, and don't get me wrong, they have done very well and gained an awful lot of ground, and it is good to see from any point of politics that a moderate ground is gaining. But a lot of that is people that were voted in the last election, 72 people out of 90 needed transfers to get in. So when you work that out, is it really possible, or was it bad vote management? And did the TUV cost the DUP most of those seats? The Alliance Party took most of those seats. It has now come out of the SDLP, which was the Nationalist Party. So as that goes, I don't think it's got any real difference in it. The problem's really is, as you've mentioned, over consent, and it's over that none of the laws that are made in Northern Ireland behind me here will be able to be enforced. All the laws, the divergence is across the European Courts of Justice, and there is no MEPs in the unionist camps. This is the real problem. There's no representation from the laws that are made. So unionists are saying democracy is not working because the European Courts of Justice are doing it. And Sinn Féin
it's a strong case.
Both have MEPs.
It's a strong case that the unionist side are making, of course. The Prime Minister will be there at Stormont a little bit later, braving the political weather, as you've been braving the actual weather this morning. Doogie, thanks so much for joining us on the briefing. We're going to be talking about the implications for wider trade a little bit later with the Conservative MP John Redwood. But let's move to the Labour Party now, because Labour MP Wes Streeting has this weekend denied preparing a leadership bid to replace Sir Keir Starmer. This comes after top party donor Wahid Ali hosted a recent fundraising event for him, as well as another MP at his home in central London. Rumours about the activities of possible replacements for Starmer began swirling around Westminster after he said he would resign if fined by Durham Constabulary over that beer and curry evening. And now Starmer's position is being widely discussed, even on the left. This week's New Statesman magazine is suggesting that the Labour leader has, quote, trapped himself. Well, let's discuss this in greater detail now. I'm delighted to be joined on the programme by Peter Edwards, the former editor of the Labour List website. Welcome to the programme, Peter. Is the Labour Party secretly plotting to replace Sir Keir?
No, I don't think so at all. I think Keir Starmer took a principled stand by the announcement the other week of, yes, I'll resign if I get a fixed penalty notice. But I think what he has done is, in a sense, he's let the genie out of the bottle. I'm sure he'll come back from Durham Police with his integrity and his clean record intact, but he's opened up the space politically where shadow cabinet ministers can have a thought about whether they'd want to stand in future. Now, I don't think
we will just try and get Peter Edwards back there. It seems like we have had a little bit of a dropping of the signal there. Sometimes
it has opened up the space for them to do that.
Sorry, we just dropped your signal there very briefly. You were discussing that potentially this space, and it would almost be remiss of cabinet ministers not to plan for the contingency, however unlikely they may believe it to be. It would almost be remiss of them to not think what happens if Sir Keir Starmer resigns.
Yeah, and I think there's two different things going on. I think it's entirely legitimate to have aspirations and one day maybe aim for higher office within your party or within government. But what I don't think was happening was a leadership move here. I don't think that, because you have to bear in mind, Wes Streeting has a marginal seat, majority of about 5,000 in Ilford North. I've campaigned there. Kim Leadbeater in West Yorkshire has a very marginal seat of just a few hundred. So it's quite normal that in a period of opposition, Labour MPs do have these extra fundraisers. Remember, the party itself gets less state funding now because it has fewer MPs. But that's how these things end up in the papers, because you have Keir Starmer talking about his leadership, and then you have Labour MPs, quite legitimately in my mind, raising funds so they can fight their own seats. But the Sunday newspapers merge these two together and become very excited as a result.
Suppose some discussions must have taken place, though, because we are hearing certain names that might want to throw their hat in the ring. Last weekend, Lisa Nandy seemed to sort of almost present a leadership pitch-style answer to a question asked of her on a Sunday morning programme. Potentially, we're looking at everyone from Lisa Nandy, maybe Yvette Cooper, maybe Rachel Reeves, maybe Louise Hay, and maybe Wes Streeting. Is that a sort of field that would make sense to you?
But Tom, that's been the case in politics for the last 500 years. And it's the same in football and transfer gossip. We like to talk about the change that's happening around the corner rather than something that's happening today. So, of course, when Labour have lost a lot of elections, it's entirely understandable that people in the media like you and I think about who could be the next leader. But cast your mind back a few years. Remember all the quote-unquote challengers to David Cameron, who never materialised, whether that was Boris Johnson as Mayor of London, or Adam Frey, a backbencher, or even at one point whether Cameron has had a falling out with George Osborne. Actual attempts to remove a sitting leader are incredibly rare. I think, in recent decades, we've had Ian Duncan-Smith in the Tories and Corbyn on Labour. And I think there's a huge amount of speculation, which is fine, because politicians have aspirations and want to lead their party. But the idea that we're anything other than a million miles away from this just seems untrue. I think Keir Starmer has essentially put everything on ice by this huge gambit with Durham Police. I'm confident he'll come back and be cleared. But until that finally happens in around 7 or 8 weeks' time, there's going to be this great frenzy about who the next Labour candidate might be, whether that's in 8 weeks' time or 8 years' time after Keir Starmer wins an election and gets into Downing Street.
Often when we talk about the Labour Party at times of party conferences, we're talking about various rule changes, threshold increases and everything else to get people over the ballot. Is it the case that potentially the people stirring up the speculation of leadership elections might be those on the left of the Parliamentary Labour Party, sort of anticipating any future rule changes that will make it harder for them to nominate a candidate of the more Corbynite variety?
No, I don't think so. And I felt that Keir Starmer's success at Labour conference last autumn on the South Coast really got understated. He actually got through a lot of rule changes that, in a sense, shut out the far left of the Labour Party. Not entirely, but it made it harder for a left candidate to get a caucus of support. So I don't think that's the case. And you have to bear in mind, where are we today with the kind of the Corbynite left in Parliament? You've got Jeremy Corbyn, no longer a Labour MP. You've got people who perhaps 5 years ago would have been seen part of that group, but now Lisa Nandy, very, very much in the mainstream moderate wing of the Labour Party, serving in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. And then you've got the kind of campaign group of MPs, which is actually relatively small, and you've had a few retirements due to ill health. So I would say what you'd call the Corbynite left of the Labour Party in Parliament is actually a lot more fragmented, for obvious reasons, compared to when Jeremy Corbyn ruled the rules in the party.
Really interesting stuff there. Well, Peter Edwards, thank you so much for talking us through it. We'll be poring over those rule changes, I am sure, and seeing exactly what thresholds are necessary. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's return to the Northern Ireland Protocol now, and more widely, the implications for the country at large. Could machinations over this protocol and disagreements with the European Union lead to full-scale trade war? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by John Redwood, the Conservative MP for Wokingham. Welcome to the programme. This discussion started, and to many people, can seem fairly parochial. To many people in Great Britain might think, why should I care about the protocol. But I suppose this government really takes its commitment to unionism and indeed its commitment to some extent to the Good Friday Agreement, which is arguably being undermined by the protocol, fairly seriously.
It's very important that we reunite our country and allow people to sell easily from GB into Northern Ireland in the way that the EU promised us. It's the EU that are breaking the protocol. They are putting fanatical levels of compliance staff into the task of supervising everything on a truck going from a British supermarket in GB to a British supermarket in Northern Ireland for no good reason. And as a result, they are damaging the trade between GB and Northern Ireland. More importantly, they're greatly upset the unionist community in Northern Ireland and are therefore damaging the Good Friday Agreement. It would be quite stupid of the EU to try and impose any kind of further restrictions on UK trade with the European Union, as and when we legislate to sort this thing out, as I hope we will do soon, because they export a lot more to us than we export to them, and they have no legal base for making any change anyway, because we are fully complying with the protocol. They are the ones that are damaging and breaking it.
Now, of course, the European Union would say to that they are following the protocol to the letter. I suppose the British government's argument is that the protocol needs to be followed not so much to the letter, but more with a sort of constructive ambiguity, with sensitivity that is required in that part of our country and its political history. But the European Union would say they're just applying the text as it is written in a very perfunctory and legalistic way. I suppose the European Union can inflict harm upon the UK. It might inflict harm on itself as well, but it can retaliate and inflict harm on us if it does go down that path.
Well, it cannot legally retaliate, and we would have rights of action in the World Trade Organization, because, of course, our trade with the EU is primarily governed by the fact that we are both members of the World Trade Organization, who have some powers over our conduct of trade, and we afford each other most favoured nation status within the WTO rules. But the EU is definitely not implementing the protocol correctly. It is tearing up the bit of the protocol which says it must respect the Good Friday Agreement. Because the whole point of the Good Friday Agreement is nothing happens in Northern Ireland without the consent of both communities. And this protocol and this deliberate disruption of GB to NI trade does not have the support of the unionist community in Northern Ireland. This is why it's so sad, and this is why the EU need to back off. Do they want to damage Northern Ireland? And if so, why? And could they go on to try and damage their trade with us? Well, if they want to break the law, of course they could. But I've got news for the EU, that it's mainly their imports to us, and there are lots of other countries around the world that would like to take their trade off them. So if they don't want to sell Irish beef on the current basis, I'm sure there are plenty of other countries around the world that would sell us beef. We could also rear more of our own, which would be a very good idea.
Well, I suppose we'll be listening very carefully to what the Prime Minister has to say today and following, of course, the legislation as we're expecting it tomorrow. For now, John Redwood, though, thank you so much for joining us on the briefing this morning, and apologies to listeners with a few problems with the line there, a bit crackly, but we persevered. Now, ministers must have the courage to tell voters to shift to road charging and saying that is inevitable and sensible. Well, that's according to a new report from the Social Market Foundation, endorsed by former Transport Secretary Lord Young. In 2021-22, fuel duty brought in an astonishing £25.9 billion to the Treasury, money that will inevitably dry up as the country switches to electric vehicles. So that's where road pricing comes in. The Social Market Foundation proposes a new system with a flat rate for each mile driven per driver and an annual free miles allowance for every driver that would cut annual costs for almost half of motorists. Well, how would this work in practice, and is it really inevitable or desirable? Well, joining me now is Scott Korf, Research Director at the Social Market Foundation. Welcome to the programme. I suppose this is something that is a challenge as people move away from the internal combustion engine, something that is banned in new vehicles from 2030. Why is road pricing the answer?
Well, as we shift towards electric vehicles, we need a new form of motoring taxation. As you said, fuel duty raises billions of pounds per year. Fuel duty and road tax combined raise over £30 billion per year for the Exchequer. So this money is going to dry up. Electric vehicles are currently not subject to road tax, and because they don't use petrol or diesel, they don't pay fuel duty either. The government needs to find the money from somewhere else, and frankly, it isn't fair to impose a tax burden on those that don't drive. Motorists should bear the costs of the congestion they're creating, and road pricing is the natural solution in a world of electric vehicles. So what we want to see is, in this new world where there isn't a need for petrol and diesel, having a per mile charge that motorists would pay. That could be something like 7 pence per mile driven. And how this could work would be each year you're at the point of your MOT at checking out the garage, your mileage would be registered and you could pay a bill. You could submit more regular readings, like you submit a regular energy meter readings. And going forward, you could also harness new technologies, so telematic boxes in cars or using even a mobile app to track the miles that you're driving.
I couldn't help but think of the film Matilda, where the father in that film winds back the counted miles on the cars to sell them. I wonder if that would be avoidable. Are there technological hurdles, is what I'm trying to say, to implementing this?
Well, we don't think so, as long as you keep the road pricing system relatively simple. And I think if you had something complex, a lot of people talk about having variable road prices depending on the time of day and location and what kind of vehicle people are driving, for example. The more complexity you introduce, the more technological hurdles there might be to overcome. You need to invest a lot in tolling infrastructure. What our survey findings suggest is there's a lot of public opposition to having a box in your car that tracks your movement and charges you. So we suggest keep it relatively simple so you don't have all these technological hurdles.
Just some free miles as well, I suppose, to make this more socially equitable. I suppose many people can understand the logic. If you drive on roads more, you should probably pay for the upkeep of those roads more. But if you're very poor, you should probably have some sort of allowance.
Yeah, so what one thing we're really keen to emphasise in our report is the current fuel duty regime is unfair. People on lower incomes pay proportionately more motoring tax as a share of their income than richer households do. And therefore, what we want is that any replacement form of motoring taxation should be fairer than this. And one way that you could do it, and I think this is one of the possibilities created by road pricing, is the possibility of creating a fairer form of motoring taxation. So what we propose in our report is this idea of a free mileage allowance. We know from our data that people on lower incomes tend to drive fewer miles on average. Therefore, that having this free mileage allowance would mean that they would pay less tax on average, and it would make motoring taxation more progressive and fairer.
Just finally in this conversation, we do have some road pricing in the United Kingdom. I'm thinking of the congestion charge and low emission zone in London. I'm thinking of some schemes that are being proposed in Manchester as well. Would this be on top of those schemes that already exist, or would that potentially be the abolition of the congestion charge?
So what we're proposing is a simple nationwide road pricing regime, but there will be parts of the UK where congestion is particularly problematic, and there will need to be complementary schemes in place. So, unfortunately, the London congestion charge would need to remain in place, because I think anyone that's driven in London knows congestion is horrendous, and therefore it's only right that motorists pay a higher levy. But this is why road pricing is fairer, is those higher motoring taxes are only in parts of the country where congestion is particularly problematic. If you're in a rural area, the roads are relatively clear, you wouldn't be facing those heftier charges.
Well, really interesting stuff there, and I'm sure it's going to be a larger point of discussion as we do all switch to those electric vehicles. Well, Scott Korf, Research Director at the Social Market Foundation, thanks for joining us on the briefing this morning. That's it for the programme today. Coming up, it's To The Point, but first is your weather forecast.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking wet at times with rain or showers moving northwards across the country. Let's take a look at the details. Well, zooming down to the southwest at lunchtime, and we'll see a mix of sunny spells and scattered showers. The showers possibly could be on the heavy side in places. The southeast will also see a mix of sunny spells and showers. In the sunshine, though, it will be feeling warm and quite humid. The showers may be a little more frequent across Wales, though, with a risk of some heavy and possibly thundery showers around. Moving east into the Midlands, and there'll be more in the way of cloud around this lunchtime, although southern areas will gradually brighten up. Temperatures there will be reaching 18 or 19 Celsius. Skies will also be rather dull across northern England, with some areas of heavy rain around, and it'll also be feeling rather cool in the east, and a breeze comes off the North Sea there. Well, into Scotland, and many parts will have a rather damp lunchtime and some heavy rain in places. It'll feel disappointing for mid-May, with temperatures staying in single figures for some. Northern Ireland, though, will be seeing skies begin to brighten up. However, some further showers will be quickly moving up from the south. Temperatures there more like 15 or 16 Celsius. And the rest of the afternoon will see the brighter skies continue to move northwards, but still with some rain around. And that's how the weather is shaping up for you this Monday morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.